Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first Illuminari live broadcast. I am your host, Kerry Collins, and co-founder of the Illuminari with Anna Cairns, my brilliant co-founder, who is working the decks and will be taking your questions today into the chat. So please do make sure that you are popping any questions that come into the chat that spring to mind today, as we want this to be a lively debate. I am excited to say that we have over 600 people that have signed up to this globally today, which shows us that we're onto something. And I'm really grateful for all of you for being here. We're all grateful. So what is Illuminari? For anybody that's missed the launch posts, Illuminari was born nearly 5 years ago now in Cannes. We got together for a dinner over some rosé, of course, some of the best brains that we knew in the industry. And whilst they are all very diverse brains from very different backgrounds, the one thing they were all agreeing on loudly is that the industry deserves better. The industry deserves less conformity, less bland presentations, less panels that agree with each other and everybody comes out of the room feeling and thinking the same thing. And so the Illuminari was born, and that is the point of the Illuminari, is to bring a better solution to the industry to tackle some of the issues that are coming up right now. So this week you might have seen Rory in his post come up with some brilliant phrases to describe who we are and our behaviour. And that is all about delightful disobedience and a cacophonation, I hope I've said that right, Rory, of dissenting voices coming together to try and bring a better answer for the industry. So I'm going to welcome five of the original Illuminari into the group right now for the debate today. So welcome Les Burnett.
Hello.
Karen Nelson-Field from Australia. Rory Sutherland. Daryl Fielding and Peter Field as well.
Oh, yeah.
So today's debate. For decades, if a client wanted capability, reach and reassurance, they bought scale. So we want to debate today whether or not the holding company is still relevant, or whether AI has completely changed that for the industry. If production power is now widely available, what exactly is scale buying you, and is small the new superpower? And I promise you, we haven't pre-aligned on this beforehand. There are no strict answers at all, and what you should expect today is a proper debate. So without further ado, let's get into it. Rory, you've said AI will accelerate conformity, not creativity. Briefly, why do you believe this?
Not because of anything that AI does or can't do at all. I'm less and less concerned with some of the limitations of AI because it's changing so rapidly. Quite a few of the things that concerned me about it earlier don't concern me about it now. There's a great phrase about artificial intelligence, which was Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman at Stanford met someone at a party and they said, "What do you do?" He said, "I study artificial intelligence." And Amos Tversky replied, "That's funny because Daniel and I study natural stupidity." And what worries me about this now predominantly is not what it can do, but what it will be asked to do. Now, the bill's going to come due. $1 trillion spent on this stuff, often by businesses which aren't really used to spending money on depreciating hardware at all. And they're going to want their money back, and they're going to go to businesses to get their money back. And the easiest way to sell this technology is headcount reduction and cost saving. So whereas as a marketer, I'm massively enthused in theory about the potential this has for completely new forms of value creation. And, to some extent, the potential for a kind of, creative renaissance. My cynical side says that the first and easiest way to sell this, and this will be the narrative that every single public limited company passes on to its investors and its analysts, is we can save money and cut costs. Why? Because tech, which has been a long-running narrative, which has been used to support cost reduction without the usual skepticism that should accompany a business's reduction in expenditure. And that's the thing that's worrying me most at the moment, which is that maybe family-owned businesses, private companies will adopt a different approach. They'll actually explore new forms of value creation and value exchange. The mainstream stock market obsessed, quarterly reporting, fetishizing organization will predominantly see this as an opportunity to reduce their cost base, specifically their headcount. Even if that doesn't work, it doesn't matter, because once they've told the story, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's my concern at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Rory. So Karen, Rory is all about the culture and the impact on structure in that way. Yours is all about the data. So does the attention science support or complicate what he's just said?
Interesting. I think he's right. I think large organizations are built to reduce risk. And I think when AI arrives, it can easily reinforce safe decisions. And I think creative and media is at a big risk of that, in my personal humble opinion. But I think the bigger problem here is less around creative conformity and the risk of creative invisibility, if you like. I mean, I've always been banging on about that. So where I see the industry at the moment and the risk in the agency side is the training set, because we're all kind of moving into, you know, for the first time in 20 years, the biggest change in a long time, but what are we training on? And AI is only as good as the input signals that it gives. And most AI signals in marketing from a media side is trained on noise. So that's clicks, but probably more so impressions, but they're delivery signals. So are we going to go backwards, in my personal humble opinion, around where, you know, I've been working here for doing this for 10 years, trying to sort of talk about the need for human signals, but is AI going to take us backwards because the most available inputs are not human, they're traffic based. So I think that's actually I've called it an AI double jeopardy, where I kind of am nervous about the next kind of 10 years. Are we going to scale dull advertising, but it's perfectly delivered but never seen and never remembered? And I think that's a real risk. So I think agency systems need attention signals as a constraint as they go. So did it break the model? I don't think it has, but I am holding back because I think it's exposed the model. And I think, you know, let's see where this next series goes, because I think it could go one of two ways, that we're even more conformist both on creative and media, or we are right in front of an incredible opportunity for the agency model and the marketing industry to be rewritten.
Yeah, really interesting. I'd like to bring Peter in here. You're probably natural allies in this area, and obviously the effectiveness data is unambiguous for you and Les in terms of long-term investment. But is AI making that harder or easier to have that conversation in the boardroom? Peter,
sorry, there you go. Technical problems even before we start. No, what I was going to say is I'm at risk of repeating what others have said here, because I agree enormously with what Rory and Karen have already said, that you know, there is this huge danger that really stems from how we use technology and how we train technology. And we've kind of been sold the bullshit before by big tech, you know, that we've been sold one picture of the benefits. And in fact, what we find is that it gets used endlessly, really, just to cut costs. That's what it is, although that's the way to sell it. That's what people want to do. So that is, I'm sure, what will happen. It doesn't have to be that way. And when we have these technical disruptions, it's usually an opportunity for new business models to come in. And I think everyone's saying, well, the holding company model is dead. It doesn't have to be. Absolutely doesn't have to be. If the holding companies take advantage of kind of their core advantage, which is greater depth of experience, breadth, knowledge, you know, roots in the ground all over the place, they could spin it to their advantage, and I'm sure it could be used well. But if they panic and lower themselves to the level of any startup, frankly, then I think it will kill the model. But just to come back to the specific area of long versus short, again, we've seen this before. We don't even, there's no question about what AI is going to do in terms of the long versus short term, because we've seen it all before. The models will be trained on short-term responses, short-term data, because it's so much easier to do that. The boardrooms of the world don't really care too much about long versus short. They're not steeped in knowledge of this. What Les and I have written about long and short has made it to very few boardrooms, if we're brutally honest. So they're going to just go where the data takes them, where the models take them, where the AI takes them. That's going to be to optimizing the hell out of short-term response, short-term clicks. And that is going to kill brands and ultimately, I would argue, make matters worse for holding companies. So look, it's all about how we use it. I was very excited by the creative execution potential of AI when it came on. I thought it was a brilliant opportunity to play with new ideas and get them executed really quickly and feel your way with them. But we're already talking about getting AI to write ads, not execute ads. And the moment you do that, you're just going to expose the weaknesses of AI. It's just going to become a recipe for dullness, as Rory has said. I think that's the way we're going to go. So look, use it wisely, great aid. Use it stupidly, which is what we're going to do, by the way, and it's going to be a horrific pain in the butt.
Thank you, Peter. Daryl, I think this is a brilliant place to bring you in with all of your kind of client-side boardroom experience. Is Peter's point right that this stuff never makes it to the boardroom and they don't care? And actually, obviously, what is the reality of how these decisions actually get made?
Oh, a big question. I do fully agree with Peter that we always get fizzing with an existential crisis the minute anything changes in our industry. And really and truly, what you have to sort of take a step back and go, this can be done stupidly and badly, or it can be done intelligently and well. And the challenge, I think, for us all is to actually know the difference as we get used to this, tremendous technology. I personally do not think that this means the end of the holding companies. I think the opposite. I think they've got the scale to invest, and actually AI is a scale play. And if they have proprietary systems which they're developing, then I think they will actually have a real asset competitively in the marketplace, as long as they do it well and they invest enough. What they also need to invest in is actually people as well, because what they could be doing is purely, as has been discussed, regarding it as a cost reduction exercise. And if they do take money out but reinvest it in the talent and the training of people who are adding the creative value, and they've got the good sense to do that, then I think they really could have something special. Whether they have that good sense remains to be seen. And in terms of a boardroom perspective, the existential crisis of the agency operating models is not even anywhere near the boardrooms. In my experience, they are more long-term than you would ever think. They aren't purely interested in quarterly results. I think they genuinely want to see the sustainability and success of the business in the long term. I could be lucky in that those are the kind of boards I've been on, but I think they are much more balanced than you might ever imagine. What does vex the directors of a company is huge digital transformations. And I've seen grown people cry in a board meeting because they found the challenges of those integrations so difficult. I think because those will often include the management of customer data, it's a great opportunities for CMOs to take their seat at the boardroom table and have a view about those things. And I think where agencies and particularly large holding companies can really partner with their clients is helping them with their digital transformations, and that is an ongoing thing, because no sooner have you got, one lot of data all in the same place and cleaned and one view of the customer, then you've got another technology that barrels in and you go around the block again. So, I think there is a scale play here, and if people are really, really smart, they'll make it an intelligence play as well. If you can have scale and brains and creativity, I think that they would have it made. I'm not overly hopeful. I think I'd probably bet that they do just save the money, because they have very stupid structures at the moment, in my view. Too many chief operating officers of no consequence roaming around the local offices.
Brilliant. Les, I'd love to bring in your point of view here. In our chats, you've been more optimistic about AI. I'd love to hear what you think about everything you've just heard.
Well, I was interested to see that all of you have said broadly the same thing, in that it depends on how we use it. And I think that's absolutely the truth. It's AI is a very clever tool, but at the end of the day, it's a tool, in the same way that a typewriter or a mechanical loom is a tool to increase productivity, or indeed having a team having a team of people working under you is a tool. Outsourcing is a tool, and you can use those tools in clever ways and creative ways and effective ways, or you can use them in dumb ways. And I think we'll see both. I think I said this in the quote that I used for Marketing Week the other day. It's like, it's an intelligence amplifier. So dumb people will use it to do dumb shit much more. Do much more dumb shit. Clever people will use it to become cleverer and do more clever things. And clever firms will use it in clever ways, and dumb firms will use it in dumb ways and go bust. I don't know. I don't think any of us can say whether the holding companies are all going to use it one way or another. But actually, who cares? I mean, I find it profoundly uninteresting whether or not the holding companies all go bust or not. It doesn't really matter. What I care about is that we are, as an industry, able to produce great work that sells things, and hopefully that the public like. And if that means that, all the big holding companies have to go to the wall, who cares?
Does anyone disagree with what was just shared?
I think, Rory, you work for
no. I work 40% of the time for a holding company, so I have a foot in both camps.
True.
I would say that the holding companies have never yet found a way to exploit scale in the creative side of the business. I think the media side of the business does actually submit to standard Adam Smith, gains to scale, gains to specialization, division of labor, and so on and so forth. And I think in the creative part of the business, scale can be reinvented to mean something much more valuable, which I think is transference of learning from one category or one client to another, which I think the current structure of agencies is almost designed to minimize. So I think we've made a mistake, which is we've taken Adam Smith. I was speaking at the Adam Smith Institute last night, and he was very conscious of the fact that these gains to scale and division of labor gains didn't apply equally in every industry. And agriculture, bear in mind he was writing in 1776, agriculture was one industry where he said you can't enjoy the same efficiencies through scale that you can. He didn't anticipate, I suppose, new equipment. But he excluded at the time agriculture from this. And I think creative industries where you're not making pins, you're trying to do something different every time, don't really enjoy the same scale efficiencies that, say, even the media industry might do. But that isn't to say that a really inspired holding company couldn't find new ways, both in investment in specific tools but also in the transference of learning across different clients. So one of the great things about AI, by the way, is sometimes it may not massively raise the ceiling, but it does massively raise the floor.
Yeah.
So the way to make AI your friend isn't to imagine your own job and what you're best at. It's to imagine what you're really bad at. And for me, that's really easy. If there's one job you wouldn't want to give me, wedding planner. Okay, because it would require immense attention to detail and logistical expertise in a field I genuinely don't care about. You know, will the flowers be here in terms of the rehearsal, in time for the rehearsal? I go, whatever. Okay, right. I'd be a terrible wedding planner. But with AI, I could be a half decent wedding planner. I wouldn't be very, very good, but I'd be okay. I'd probably get things to arrive. And so, you know, that's an important facet, by the way, that, you know, and, you know, a lot of things are improved really by raising the floor, not by raising the ceiling. But in the creative industries, you are in some ways absolutely in the business of raising the ceiling.
Yeah. Actually, can I? I kind of buy that. I think ideally what you need to be doing is raising the floor and raising the ceiling, and I kind of think that's one of the things that will happen. I'm not specifically thinking just of creative work, but generally in jobs in our economy. What AI can sort of enable is people who are not that skilled can become, you know, decent, you know, moderately skilled, like you becoming a half decent wedding planner from being an incompetent one. And people who are very skilled can become very, very skilled and much more productive. So superstars can suddenly achieve a great deal more. What I think will be a bit uncomfortable is if you're in the middle, you know, if you're a you know, a solicitor who does will planning, and that's your bread and butter, and you know you're quite good at it. It's not very, very skilled, but not many people can do it. You could suddenly find yourself replaced by, you know, a machine with a 16-year-old work experience person. Can I also I want to give you a very specific example of raising the floor in a holding company, and that's at DDB. One example of a large network that's now gone. But a couple of years ago, we used AI very explicitly to raise the floor with a thing called the Bad Ideas Board, which was every time we were briefed on a big international pitch, we gave the brief to AI, and AI immediately came up with a raft of strategic and creative ideas. And then what we did was we made sure we didn't use any of those, because those were the bad ideas, and we would have to do better than that.
Brilliant. Excellent. I love that. Peter, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is that we've been kind of making an assumption in this conversation that everyone would agree that we should be raising the ceiling, that great creativity is something we should be aiming to achieve with AI. And I think we would all agree on this. It's a no-brainer to us because we know what you can achieve with that, but it's absolutely not a given out there in the world of business. And I don't think we should assume it is. There are plenty of people out there saying, supporting, believing that, you know, adequate is good enough. Let's just tick all the boxes. Let's make sure that we achieve all of the required known kind of rules of effectiveness. But this creative excellence thing, that's for the fairies. We're not going to bother with all of that. And that is what we're really up against. So we shouldn't assume that raising the ceiling is going to be a consequence of this, because I think the primary role which AI will be put to in a creative sense is going to be raising the floor. And as both Les and Rory have said, that is not a wasted endeavour at all. But if that's all we do, we're going to end up with conformity. Regression to me, we're all going to be about the same. It's going to become some kind of a commodity. You know, you press a button and you know pretty much what kind of advertising you're going to get. And I think we're already beginning to see that even before AI, kind of started to muscle in on this. There's this idea of let's not do anything too risky. Let's just know we're ticking all the boxes. And that's not great news. It's not great news for anyone, frankly. I think Daryl's already put the case for doing something excellent, and that's what we always need to do.
I mean, the optimistic story would be. Oh, sorry. Do you want to?
I was just going to add to that. I think that's my biggest concern, if I'm honest. Like, we've been on the pavement for years and years and years saying, you've got to improve this and do that, and then your brand will grow. We've even seen, as recently as this week with Dr. Fu and his article that's come out around lack of growth in big businesses. I've read articles to that effect in McKinsey before. And I'm so nervous, Pete, because I think all the work and all of the things we talk about, it's just going to be too hard now, because once it's trained, I feel like it's this beast that's not undone. And to your point, someone will press the button and said, well, the machine tells me this. And so I think it's going to be harder for change. So I think more than ever, if we think in my business, the viewability metrics came in and life changed for 20 years. I feel like that's one of these moments in time where it's going to be even harder to change what's in the box, because it's based on, a big organization just, not wanting or not being able to change after this. So I feel like this is a moment in time where it's going to make or break the industry, personally.
And if I may bob in, I think one of the things that I feel CMOs need to do is to work on their courage, because I see more timidity there than is helpful and acceptable even, actually, because if you're going to own differentiation and creativity and effective marketing, you do need a brave chief marketing officer to sell that into the board and to the organization. And I worry there's so much fear around. We're all going to lose our jobs. We're all going to be replaced by machines. The CMOs get a bit of a beating sometimes in the boardroom, and I think should be a lot better equipped for those conversations. But I really do think that courage is one of the superpowers that we need to build in our marketing leaders. And it seems a little sort of sentimental of me to say that, maybe, but I just feel it all around me is everybody is too frightened, and they all need to, kind of grow the proverbial pair.
Daryl, this is the point that, effectiveness, what's the measure? The measure is what the machine tells you is effective. So this is my point. It's like, I think we're actually moving into a world where, a CMO will look at the machine or look at whatever the outcomes are from the AI system and say, oh, yes, we ticked the box and we were effective. But really, actually, it's even more of a black box than it ever used to be, because the way that we measure effectiveness will be systematized, if that makes sense.
We're still.
I think the CMO owns the machine. I mean, in the job when I was in those kind of jobs, I didn't have a lot of places to hide. If it wasn't good, it was my fault. If the agency, wasn't good, it was my fault. I should have had a different agency. I think the accountability of a C-suite marketer, is very much higher than people often give them credit for. I think, you should be owning the machine of what you're measuring, and boards care about whether the money is flowing into the coffers, not the intermediary metrics. If you own the machine, you can't blame the machine.
Brilliant point.
I think it is entirely possible to use AI to produce to make longer term measurement easier, actually.
Well, that's a hope, right? For all of us.
Interesting one, isn't it? It'd be good.
Well, I mean, I've spent 40 years doing that kind of longer term measurement, and all of a sudden, I'm thinking I could do that without actually having to have a team anymore.
Yeah,
So
but the big question is, will that be the way it's used? And I mean, the optimism, if Les is optimistic about it, yeah, you're undoubtedly right, Les. It could be used to do that, and it could be used to transform our commitment to long term. But it's so much easier to use it just to drive
Yeah.
short term.
Excellence is
so much
hard,
easier.
isn't it? Sorry to interrupt you, Peter. I mean, I say
Yeah,
this
no,
till I'm
go
blue in
on.
the face. Excellence is hard. I'm sorry, guys. You know, if it was easy, it'd be everywhere.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard.
When I-
Excellence is difficult. It's crawling over broken glass half the time to get to something brilliant.
By the way, in defense of the floor raising, non-shittiness is a virtue in itself.
Yeah.
And the most optimistic use of AI I've heard actually happened earlier today when I was in an interview with the chief marketing officer of Zurich Insurance. They have 60,000 documents which are sent out to customers, generally written by lawyers in a way that's completely unfriendly, evasive, looks essentially as if what we're trying to do is get out of paying you under any circumstances. And
Surely
they use AI to rewrite all sick. Now, obviously, some of these documents needed a human lawyer to check they weren't promising things they couldn't deliver, and they needed humans to occasionally tweak them and say more bullet points, break this up, make it more friendly. But that would have been vastly too labor intensive to have done even 5 years ago. And so what you now have is 60,000 various documents sent out to customers at various decisive moments in their lives, which are now, at the very least, not crap. Now, that actually is a fantastic use of the technology. Something which would be, if you tried to do that using purely human copywriting talent, you'd bankrupt your company. Okay, but it's still absolutely worth doing.
But this is the point of what we
dream
train
of the
shittiness on. That's the point.
Yeah.
Sorry, Karen, I couldn't hear that. Say that
didn't
again.
hear.
I was just going to say, but that's because we know what, in this case, what shittiness is and shittiness isn't. But my point is, you've still got to train something that says this is not shitty. And that's where I'm concerned, because I'm talking about mass distribution of content across the media ecosystem. So what is the shittiness improvement is what my concern is.
I think you just nailed the dilemma here. AI is already making enormous impacts where we can clearly define right from wrong, good from bad. Right? It's almost like a binary. It's very clear when we get it right. Medical research. We know what a good medical outcome is. Medical research. It's a brilliant tool there. When it comes to creativity, it's not immediately obvious, is it? And this is the problem. We can't define it yet, and we're probably a long way off defining it precisely, at least in a way that you can train AI.
Don't you think the customer might notice the difference? I mean, I'm perhaps a soppy old thing, and I have faith in the customer. The customer is not stupid. I think, as somebody once said, she's your wife, from many, many decades ago. But I just think there is, and I put a post on this the other day about something that the Urban Animation call thumminess, which is about the sort of handmade feel of it. And having been part of the, Dove's Real Beauty campaign, what was real beauty caused us quite a lot of headaches, to be honest. But you just knew when you had it, and you could tell as a human the realness. And I do hope that the customer will, kind of call us all out on, epic quantities of shite.
Yeah. Though, Dara, you've just raised a really brilliant example. I mean, how do you think the campaign for Real Beauty would have gone down if it had been produced by AI? I mean, it was railing against retouching in various parts and all that. There are a lot of great campaigns, great brands out there. And I'm speaking to one not long ago who say we cannot afford to touch AI at the moment because our brand is about truth and reality and, earthiness.
One of the big gaming companies is refusing to allow AI in their games creators because they passionately believe that human edge is what makes them differentiated and appealing. And I can only bring the sort of experience of kind of knowing when the woman was real. We had a precise definition. It was a woman without an agent. We had to have it sort of down in hard guidelines at the time.
I love that.
I believe that
much higher margins that way.
Agent doesn't take it up. I will have you on that one. We paid the women that appeared in the Dove ads the same as a standard rate model, incidentally. So just can't have me on that one. But I think there's something hardwired into human psyche, and to Karen's point, it may change. We may lose that in time, and I think it would be sad if we did. I think humans just can spot fake because we're evolved to, and I'm hoping that I can read a post on LinkedIn now and go, bore off, basically, and call that out, after all the sort of reflections and optimism for the new year. I hope that human beings who we are making all of this work for will be able to tell the difference. And the brands that mix that scalability, use of AI and thumminess, authenticity, if you want to call it that, I think they'll be the ones that will win. And that will become pretty obvious.
There's another possibility.
We'll start going, well, why are they doing so well with their real women and their thummy clay models?
There is another possibility, which is just the effort of having to continually distinguish between what is real and what is fake becomes so tiresome that we end up trusting only physical direct mail and our friends. Okay, so it's almost like a back to vinyl moment where I was completely bemused by my children buying vinyl records. It made no sense to me at all because I grew up with vinyl records, replaced them with CDs, and was immensely grateful when streaming became available. But to my children, vinyl records and physical direct mail are massively novel.
Yeah.
And there is that possibility that just the effort effectively of continually having to distinguish between what's real and what's fake becomes so tedious that we basically abandon the game altogether.
Yeah, but also in the advertising context, there's the very real risk that the economics of this will make reality non-existent. Nobody can afford to do it for real anymore. So we are only going to see AI artifice. So we're going to lose that. And I agree with you, Darryl. At the moment, I think we probably can all see it. But the risk is that ability will atrophy over time and then disappear.
Well, what I would say to that, Peter, is does it matter? Does it matter if it's all fake? It's only advertising. And we're talking about this like that real advertising, if you like, is somehow inherently valuable. It's not. Advertising is a very trivial, pointless activity mostly, and it only has a point in so far as it sells stuff. So if fake advertising sells, then that's fine.
Sorry, I'd just like to say for a moment, because I think that was the point, wasn't it? Karen was saying that the things that organisations are increasingly relying on for measurement is what we need to worry about here, and that kind of segues into.
And I was going to link that up to what Karen said and what Darryl said. So the important thing is if it sells, if it works. And what Darryl, what you said is, well, trust that the consumer, that the customer will judge it correctly. Well, it may well be that they can tell the difference between real and fake advertising, or they may not care. What matters if it actually sells.
I totally agree, and I think my point was beyond the ads. Actually, I think in the world, if you're making Fortnite or computer games, that is your product. There are movies and art and other things that is consumed. My point was a bit broader than just the ads, but would apply to them too.
That is a bigger issue. I think we probably shouldn't try and solve the whole of Western culture today. I think we should probably. I mean, the original brief was let's talk about advertising holding companies, which I think was a little too narrow. But I think let's think about advertising.
Have you got any examples of AI ads or creativity that has worked well within AI?
Me?
Yes, for anybody.
Well, what I would just say is, again, I think there's a tendency when talking about advertising and AI to just focus on, if you like, the creative idea and production and so forth. And our business, the advertising business or the marketing business, is much wider than that. So I can give you an example of a project that I worked on a little while ago, which was about strategy It wasn't about making the creative work. And we used AI in a way that basically this company had huge amounts of information that it couldn't make sense of. And in a very short space of time, we were able to allow them to see the wood for the trees using AI. It would not have been possible without it, because they had, I don't know, it was like 150,000 documents, research reports, pieces of creative, etc., etc. But we were able very quickly to put it together in a form that enabled them to see that they were under-investing in brand. And I don't think that that would have been at all possible without the machinery, let alone doing it in 3 days, which is what we did.
Yeah, but I think that's a good example of where it's unarguable that AI is a help. The synthesis of massive amounts of information into concise, comprehensible findings. That I think we're not arguing with that. The question is, when you have all ads written by probably the same kind of piece of machine learning driven AI, what's going to happen to create? Is it all going to converge? And I think Rory
again,
made
like
this point,
I said
probably
before,
is the case.
Some
We
people
will
use
lose
it.
the difference.
Some people use it in a dumb way, which is, let's just press the button and get the ads out. And some people will use it like the DDB way, which is, let's find the dumb answers and not do that. I'm sure Rory is using AI, and I'm sure he's not using it in a dumb way.
Well. I'm also conscious of a problem. Does anybody remember The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and the total perspective vortex?
Yes.
Which
Very
was
much.
designed to basically destroy your self-esteem by placing your insignificance in the context of the wider universe. Okay. And it turned out that the machine had been designed for Zaphod Beeblebrox. So he came out of it not as an absolutely ruined human being, but because the machine had been designed for him, he kind of came out of it saying, it just reinforced my belief that I'm an unbelievably cool guy. And it does occur to me that it is incredibly deferential, AI. Now, I'm probably, by dint of my own personality and needs, asking it creative questions. Can you think of an oblique way of doing this? It gets to know me. It learns my preferences and knows that if you tell me anything that isn't counterintuitive, I lose interest immediately. By contrast, for every one of me, there are going to be 50 people going, how can I reduce headcount in my call center? Okay, right. Yeah. And so consequently, we probably like AI more than we should, because to each of us, it's a kind of mirror of ourselves. And what we need to be conscious of is what the other people are asking.
Yeah, you can change the settings on that.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean,
I've done the temperature.
One of the first things I did was I said, I call ChatGPT chatters, and my motto is chatters flatters. So I said to my mate,
a planner.
I said to my mate chatters, do you have other ways of giving me feedback? And he immediately gave me 6 or 7 different modes. So I started trying them. Very quickly went back to being flattered. but if you are tough enough and and have the will to get it to challenge you, then that's a really good use of it. So I sometimes do that. I will say, okay, here's my hypothesis. Now tell me why I'm wrong. Take this to pieces.
I asked for it for a takedown of me. I have to admit, I only did that once.
I want to flag briefly that we really would like to go to questions if anyone's got any, so please put those in the chat. And I wanted to sort of bring this back to the holding company question agencies and ask Karen, what's her advice to agencies on what they should be doing now from a media planning perspective when it comes to attention?
Oh, that's an easy one. Human data becomes infrastructure, and the systems you build and the logic that you train. And I think that's my critical point is, the word attention, people think about in different ways. At the end of the day, human viewing patterns and human, interactions with ads should be a part of the training data that sits behind it. That's absolutely as simple as it is. Yeah. And I think until we do that, if we continue to use what I've been banging on about for a long, long time now. Business 10 years old now. I think that'll be a mistake. So that's my big piece.
So, and what does, thank you, Karen, what did the group think of the kind of practical things that CMOs, agencies can do to raise the bar on creativity in an AI world? Holding company agency or boutique agency or not, what can they be doing now differently? Daryl had a great point earlier on courage for CMOs, but how would you make that happen?
How would I give courage to CMOs?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think it comes quite a lot from capability, actually, rather than just sort of bravura. And I think really educating CMOs about boardroom metrics, about finance, about, you know, the data and the systems and all of the stuff that they really, really need to understand. Because if you know what you're doing, you can walk into any room and hold your own, I would say. And I think investing in their training and development and the training and development of everybody, I'm completely disgusted by the lack of investment in people on the marketing side, but especially on the agency side. I think really building that strength and capability. It's a fairly boring answer, I think. I don't think they need to be shimming up trees and hugging each other. I think they need to be learning how a balance sheet works.
Oh, well, is there also an opportunity for marketers? Because we've always had this quantification bias, because numerical information aggregates and you can manipulate it. Verbal information didn't. Is there an opportunity to aggregate verbal non-numerical information using AI so the boardroom conversation becomes less numerical? Because I'm always conscious of quantification bias, which is because of the natures of numbers and how they fundamentally aggregate and fit into a spreadsheet in a way that words don't. Fundamentally, high level, at the top of any large organization, the only information that can actually aggregate all the way up is numerical and financial. And that information is largely collected for the purpose of transactional billing, not for the purpose of insight and understanding. So the chance I think we might have to make boardroom discussions slightly less quantitative strikes me as a bit of a marketing opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
I mean,
can I come back on that? Can I come back on that? Because I think the understanding of the numbers is to give the CMOs the confidence to have the conversations in the room. But actually, most boards are as soft as butter when they bring the new advert in. Honestly, I mean, they're much less hard-nosed than you might imagine. And I think that real ability to, you know, in my book, I've talked about socking it to the organization, you know, and socking your strategy and your creativity and your ideas to the board and, you know, the whole company is a huge part of the CMO's job. I remember talking to my boss at Vodafone, and I was going in to do some presentation everybody loved for the umpteenth time. And I said, oh, you know, I'm fed up with doing this. I feel as I'm in showbiz. And he said, that is your job. And he was right. You know, I think that sales, that enthusiasm, the emotional side of it is huge. That's not the bit, funnily enough, that the CMOs lack. They lack confidence because they don't have the other bits, but actually what they do need to go is into the boardroom knowing that they can talk about the numbers, but also that they can absolutely sell it to that level of people. You know, everybody knows the story of how we sold the Dove campaign in now, you know, but I've done it in other ways, in other contexts, just sock it to the organization and appeal to their head and their heart. And let's not forget that, you know, boards, companies, you know, they're all people with hearts.
A question from the audience, though, is in this day and age, it's, you know, great to talk about Dove. You know, I've got some examples of selling through some brave campaigns myself, but in this kind of very measurement heavy environment, do we think we can make that human work come through?
Yeah.
Depends who the measurement. It depends who's measuring it, in my humble opinion. So
Absolutely.
I'm looking under the hood of a lot of the formats, and yeah, it depends who's measuring it.
So what would be good measurement and what's bad measurement, Karen, if you're happy to share? Share the good.
Independence is measurement that's good, right? So I think, yeah, I mean, that's probably all I want to really say. I don't want to go into too much detail about the supercomputer.
Peter, do you want to build on that? Or Les?
I just make one point that we haven't really got into here yet, which is that there are a lot of very powerful tech companies with some really important vested interests in the kind of measurements that are made. And they do have the capability.
It's not.
They do. I couldn't possibly imagine who I'm talking about here, but but they do have the capability, because they are investing a lot in AI, to influence the kind of measurements and the kind.
So that's what I call technoplasmosis, where you infect the brain of the host organism, so that effectively. There's a great book called The Score by C.T. Nguyen. I recommend it to anybody. He's a kind of Vietnamese-American philosopher. And it's all about scoring systems and metrics and their strengths and weaknesses. Fantastic read. And the subtitle of the book is How to Avoid Playing Someone Else's Game. And I think to a large extent, the tech platforms have gamed the metrics so that unwittingly, the client organizations are pursuing metrics largely to further the interests of the platforms, not their own interests. The other interesting thing is that when you develop metrics for the purpose of comparison, you tend to use the same metrics as everybody else, which then drives conformity. And I was saying, if you want to be a brand, actually, if you want to be an individual human being, you've got to have some metrics of success that are uniquely yours, right? It's no good just saying my parents wanted to be a lawyer, so I've got to be a lawyer. That's playing someone else's game. You've got to have some metrics of success that are unique to you. And if you want to be a brand, you've got to measure yourself against some criteria which your competitors aren't pursuing. And so that's another fear I have about this business of sort of convergence through the need for comparison effectively causes everybody to use the same metrics, which then uses everybody, which creates kind of hyper competition around the same space.
So this is my point at the minute, and publicly going with it next week, is the idea of constraint data. So if you think about how agents work, if you then they to your point, they all optimize towards the loudest input data, right? So the noise comes in. And so my concern is that, to your exact point, that the publishers will come in and flood the market with data that allows training. So constraint is a big piece of my agenda for the next few years around, how do we kind of normalize some of the agents or the chaos agents that come in and offer constraint data. That's my thing.
And the other one is that there is a form of advertising now which didn't exist when I came into the industry, which is not, if you give us some money, we will make you more famous, but unless you give us some money, we will make you disappear. And so that's why, by the way, Amazon Basics makes batteries, because they can basically threaten Duracell by saying, if you don't give us a stack of money, even if people are searching for Duracell, never mind AAA, we'll put Amazon Basics batteries all the way down the page and you'll be underneath the fold. Now,
I agree.
That isn't Mad Men. That isn't Mad Men. That's actually The Sopranos. It's not advertising. It's a protection racket. And so, for example, I think Hotels.com in their annual report, when asked what is the biggest threat to your business, they basically said Google could destroy us on a whim. I'm paraphrasing there.
It's funny you say that, Rory, because I had a dinner once with a fairly high-profile CMO who said exactly that the one thing that he loses sleep over is that algorithm, because it literally can deprioritize you without any warning. And so that is a problem, for organizations.
I pay for a search engine, Kaggy.com, pay about $20 a month for a search engine which is effectively objective. And it has the miraculous effect that if I search for a hotel, it brings up the hotel. It doesn't bring up 5 online travel agents and 6 nearby hotels. It actually brings up the thing I'm looking for. And there's the difference between what I'm trying to find and what somebody else wants me to see.
Brilliant.
It strikes me as very strange that someone like Goldman Sachs is completely happy to have everybody using Google every day to make important business decisions without realizing that anybody who wanted to could effectively distort the information that everybody working for Goldman Sachs actually sees.
Brilliant.
I mean,
Rory,
yeah.
we're going to have
Sorry.
to, well, brilliant. I mean, this has been exactly like dinners in Cannes over the years, exactly what the Illuminari is, building each other's points. We are moving to 4 minutes to go until the broadcast closes. I would love to give everybody a short moment to kind of wrap what their kind of summary is of this discussion and what their hope is for the industry. Peter, shall I start with you?
Okay, in 30 seconds, proceed with extreme caution. It would be my word. Use AI to add value, not just to destroy costs, to cut costs. Think about, uses that will improve my output, improve my product, not simply make it easier, cheaper, quicker. I think if we use it that way, we will make fewer, but not no mistakes.
Brilliant. Les, would you like to build on that?
As I said, you can use AI to do stupid things, or you can use it to do clever things. I think this is another thing that will just speed up creative destruction. It will destroy weak and stupid companies and people, and it will make clever people more productive. I think we have quite a clever bunch of people here. It certainly make us all more productive. So fire the holding companies and hire Illuminari.
You're amazing. Rory, over to you.
I think that the judicious decisions of when to use it and when not to use it are really important. There's nothing new about us using other devices and tools to enhance our intelligence. And the trick is knowing effectively when to use these tools and when to leave them behind. Weirdly, and I don't know why this is, I'm an absolutely compulsive non-note taker. I never write anything down. There are other people who are, I equally respect, who are obsessive notes takers. Okay, my argument is that if you write something down, it's a way of not remembering it. It's a bit like an autopilot. It makes you less good at flying the plane. And so I have a weird aversion to notes taking, but it's entirely personal to me. And actually a notebook is simply an extension of our human brain. It's an amplification of it, if you like. And understanding this, I think, is really important. But the one vital thing is that I've written about this in The Spectator, if anybody wants something more lengthy. There is a danger with all technology, which is it arrives as an option and then becomes an obligation. So, in other words, parking apps, okay? You had a nice machine, you could put coins in, but you also had an app. Wonderful. Then someone notices that the apps are a lot cheaper than the machines because you don't have to pay anybody to empty the coins. And suddenly you're forced to use the app, okay? And that's the concern I have. Automatic ticket machines at railway stations. They're great when they enhance the guy at the ticket, window. But suddenly you discover there's nobody to talk to, because they've got rid of the guy at the ticket window and you're left with just the machine. That's the fundamental threat of technology. It arrives as a welcome option and ends up as a tedious obligation, to a point where my dad in his late 80s couldn't park anywhere. Okay?
Yes, got you. Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you. Karen, what would you like to say?
I feel like agencies have got one shot to get this right. And I think we rush things a lot. So, treat this next 20 years and a moment in time as a planning opportunity. And, obviously from my side, AI will optimize whatever signal we give it. So really think about, what does your next phase look like? Do you want to grow brands or do you want to harvest existing demands? So if that's the case, we kind of need, obviously, to train AI models on human data, and we see that in our own data, that the attention data is an amazing constraint. So I just think you've got one shot. Let's get the next section of our lives right.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I've made so many notes and we're about to wrap very shortly. So I'd just like to conclude by thanking everyone from the Illuminari for this brilliant debate. I hope everybody online loved it as much as I did sitting in the room. We'll be following up with the date of our next broadcast, which is on May the 11th, and a link to that. But yeah, just huge thank you to Rory, Les, Karen, Nick dialing in from Australia at 3 a.m, Peter and Daryl for a brilliant debate. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, lovely.